Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. So today I wanted to kind of answer one of the most common questions that I get, and that question is what causes most of my print failures? And that's kind of a tricky question to answer because every person, every machine, and everything is completely different. But I have come up with my three most common problems when it comes to printing with the P1S, P1P, or the X1 carbon, or the X1. The H2D, I'm assuming, will end up having some of these same problems. I don't know because I haven't tested it, but considering it uses an AMS system, which causes most of my problems, and it also purges filament, there is a good chance that that is what causes the problem. So I'm going to run you through my three. I've come up with three to focus on, so I don't make this video super long, but realistically there's three that kind of make my life a living hell. So this is one of my newest printers. This is Ghoul. This is a Bambu Labs P1S. It is fully updated to all the newest firmwares and all that fun stuff. So there's nothing like that that has really changed. No firmware updates or issues have caused anything wrong with this. But I will open this up, get you guys a little bit of a closer view, and I'll show you specifically some of the problems I've been having. And ways to mitigate them. There's one that I actually have absolutely no idea how to mitigate, and I've just been hoping that it doesn't happen every time. So I'm going to get you guys a close-up view inside of this printer, and from there we will continue. All right, so here we are. This is inside of Ghoul. I don't know if you guys can see the bottom of the printer right there. Let me check. You can. So I'll just reach in here and grab the first problem here. So one of the biggest problems I have when it comes to these 3D printers, specifically the P1S and P1P, the X1 carbon doesn't have, or it does have AI features which kind of mitigate this, but one of the biggest problems I have is when filament, like this, for instance, is purged out the back, and you can see this one's actually stuck right there, and I just knocked it down. When filament right here is purged, sometimes it'll stick to the nozzle, and when it comes out of the nozzle, it will land right there on that X carriage. And that is, or the Z lead. And what will happen essentially is when this tries to go up, and I'm just going to jog this up because I want to break everything. When you do this, and I'm just going to let it do this just because this is a homing sequence right here. But you'll see as this goes to Z after it purges filament, because the process of this starting a print is to first heat up, purge filament, get the filament set and ready for the first set of layers. If you're doing, orange, it's going to be orange. If you do red, it's going to be red, whatever it is. And then it'll bring up everything to load, right? So what it's going to do after we're to purge filament and empty it, or send it down the chute, would be to level the Z, or zero the Z, so you know how high it is, and then it'll go through a leveling sequence. So what happens sometimes, which you guys can't really see, that piece of filament is stuck in there, and I'm going to get you guys a little closer. That filament is stuck back there, right? And so this happens sometimes after purging. It will go through, and that filament shouldn't be doing that. But what's happening right now is it can't zero or get depth because that filament purge back there stops the printer from actually leveling, and then you'll end up getting an HMS error, which of course right now, because I told it to home, it doesn't know any different. It's not going to pull up that error, I don't think, but you never know, it might. No, it didn't. But that causes one of my biggest problems, and the only way I've found to fix that is you can swap out this little purge wiper right there. But realistically, that doesn't fix the problem. I need to replace that one anyways, but that does not fix the problem 100%. You can use different versions of it. I've actually never found a way to stop that from happening. I have tried and tried. You could create a cover, you could do something, but realistically, that won't help anything. Sorry. That is one of the biggest problems I have ran into doing this. So that is my top problem that I face on almost a day-to-day basis. Anytime I start a print, there's a chance that that happens. So just a heads up there. All right, now we're gonna move on to my second biggest problem that I always run into. So the second problem I run into for most of the time is AMS Assist Overload problems. And essentially what an AMS Assist Overload problem is when you have too much friction from the outlet of the AMS into the inlet of the printer. Now there's 3 areas that you always have to check, right? The first one is your filament buffer. This thing right here, if you get too much filament buildup inside of, and let me reset that. If you get too much filament buildup inside of this little area right here, it won't cause that retraction that it's looking for, and it'll actually cause issues inside of here, plus dust buildup just kind of messes up the actual travel distance, and then you'll get an assist motor problem from there. The second issue you'll have is spools inside of here either having too little filament on them to where like it can't pull it without actually turning the spool, so it just kind of grinds as it tries to pull, and there's not enough curve in the filament to get it into the AMS. That's another issue you can have. Usually it's caused by cardboard spools because they don't have the kind of connection that these do, the plastic spools. And then from there, the other places you can check, and I'll show you on the back of the printer real quick. So it's usually cardboard spools, AMS type thing here, too little filament, not enough grab. The second spot or third spot I would check is right here. The dust that builds up inside the buffer can actually get trapped in here and cause that same issue. And then the last place, of course, along that travel path is on top of your tool head right here. So what can happen here is you have too steep of an angle, like say that, and then it won't allow the filament to come into the top of the tool head, and it'll keep pulling it back out and retracting it, trying to get that, and only try a couple times before it gives up. And that's another place you can check for the AMS Assist motor overload problem. Finally, the last thing that I always find myself running into, because of 3D printing with enclosed printers, not such a big deal. A lot of people like to remove the build plates, flex them, and have them put back in. When you do that, you invoke quite a large error or a margin of error. And typically people will forget and they'll touch this build plate, right? They'll put their hand right here on it, like I just did, for dramatic effect. And the oils from your hands can cause adhesion issues. One of the biggest things people seem to forget is that the PEI on this, or I don't know if this is PIE or this is PEI. I believe this is PEI. The coating on this can get worn off, and people will forget that that's a possibility. And you actually can use both sides of this, so don't worry if one side wears off, the other side should be fine. Just remember that. But one of the biggest causes for print failures for me, even though I only print PLA, PETG, and ABS, is warping. And warping is caused mainly because of heating issues. Adhesion issues typically can be fixed with glue stick. I use a lot of bamboo glue stick on just about every print, just because I'm tired of things failing. But the things to look for if you don't want to have adhesion issues, low contact point. So for instance, if I wanted to print, I don't know why there's a screw here, but if you wanted to print this little screw, right? Your contact point for that screw is just that little head, ignoring the hexagon there. And if you have very little contact point, for instance, this right here actually printed just fine. This is a Raspberry Pi thing. This has pretty good contact point for the size of this, so I don't have to worry about adhesion issues as much. If it was much larger and spread out the entire width of the build plate, yeah, you might want to use a glue stick, or you might want to up your temps a little bit on the bed to allow this to stick to it without warping. PLA really doesn't warp all that much, but when you start using your entire build volume, of course, all of that goes out the window. Now, Bamboo Studio does have a way you can fix this by adding ears to the corners. That does help. I think glue stick still works the best. If it's a really tricky model and there's a very low point of contact, like say just this width of contact, then I would probably use glue stick and a brim. And then if you don't want to use a brim at all, at least use glue stick. And make sure these are clean. The easiest way to clean these that I have found is soapy water, hot soapy water, like really hot soapy water, and Dawn dish soap to degrease it. If you don't know, dish soap is a degreaser, at least Dawn dish soap is a degreaser. And then degrease it completely with Dawn dish soap or something like it. And then I come in with IPA and I clean it off just to get any dust, debris, and water off of it. And then I let it dry. And I've never had problems after that. But typically that's not required as long as you take care of these, especially if they're enclosed. If you have a P1P, you're going to need to do it more often. And this rule really goes to any 3D printer. Glue stick, highly recommended. I don't like using hairspray, if anybody's curious. It can get on too many things inside the printer. It gums up a lot of things. If you're gonna put hairspray on, take this off and do it outside the printer, but it will gum up other things in the room. But yeah, those are my 3 things to watch out for. Really, it's just for the warping part, what causes most of the failures is just not paying attention or not thinking about it when I do it, and watching the corners to make sure that there's actually flat contact with the build plate. And you can see that in Bamboo Studio. And just making sure that if it is too thin of an area, that you go through and either add a brim or you use a little extra glue stick to try and get it to stay down. You can also slow down your first layer time to allow more adhesion onto the build plate, and you can also heat up the build plate. So hopefully that helps anybody out there who's new to printing. So I'm going to get into a little bit of a different angle, close out this video, and give you my closing thoughts. Well, those are the 3 things that cause most of my print failures. 2 of those, one of those is user error problems. And I could go down in depth about the poop chute issues that happen on the P1S and P1P because I don't have that AI detection. So just a little added note there, if you're doing a lot of color changes, make sure you check your purge chute. You can lose quite a bit of prints because of step loss. This doesn't have step recovery. The H2D does. I don't know if the X1 Carbon does. I never really thought of asking about it, but I'm pretty sure with all the extra features you get on the X1 that you do have that. But yeah, those are the 3 things to watch out for, at least in my thousands of hours of printing. I think in total I have just over 7,000 hours of printing on these 4 machines, plus another 1,000 hours on my minis. And who knows before that. I mean, that's just on these machines. So one thing to check for me is make sure that your purge nozzle wipers are as new as they can be. If you don't like the ones that are there, add something else. Try to stop the purged filament from ending up on the build plate, or even worse, on your Z-axes. And if that happens, you're going to end up not leveling or not homing. And then if it homes, it'll just fail. AMS motor overload, the easiest way to fix that is make sure you have a very smooth and clean entrance into the printers. So make sure you don't have any sharp bends. I know there's one that comes out of the back into the printer. Avoid sharp bends, try and do swooping bends. It'll help a lot with friction. Friction is the main occurrence of that issue. So try to limit that. Cardboard spools as well. Try to do something to either tape them or print an adapter for them so that they don't rub on it. And then there are adapters you can print to help with that. And then of course the last thing is build plate adhesion. Double check, make sure you're making good contact, make sure you have your glue, make sure you have a brim. If you don't want to use a brim, or you don't know how to get a brim off, this is a de-burring tool. I can link it down in the description. This is what I use when I use a brim, and then I use a heat gun to clean up the color difference that it occurs from the scraping. But yeah, those are what I would do. Those are the things I'd watch out for. Thanks everybody for watching. And of course, I have to say thank you to Kay Weiler and Everett Hope for being subbed to me on Patreon. If you want to join it, links down in the description, as well as my Etsy store. I'm shipping out orders multiple times a day nowadays, so I'm going to start recording all those for everybody again. And of course, Discord should be linked down in the description if anybody has any issues they want to talk about or anything printer related, let me know. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Peace. Thanks for watching. Now go print shit.